afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Region's Legions of Strong Hearts. I'm Siobhan Howard, and I'm the Acting Manager at the Charles Sturt University Innovation Hubs, and we're really thrilled to be part of Spark Festival. I'd like to start by paying my respect and acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait People Islanders as the traditional custodians of the land, rivers and seas. And I acknowledge and pay my respect to the elders both past, present and emerging of the Wiradjuri Nation, on which I stand today, and of all nations. So before I introduce our panel, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Charles Sturt University Innovation Hubs. We've been up and running for over 3 years now, and we support our regional innovators. And we deliver a number of programs, including our Ready to Launch Incubator program, our Founders Lounge and events for our founders, and we also provide programs for entrepreneurs in schools and universities. So I'd also just like to touch on our Ready to Launch program, as this is where I met all our panel members today. So this is a 10-week program that really helps founders take an idea and work through that idea into some cases a full-blown startup. And so the program's really perfect for all kinds of founders, whether you're studying or you have a day job. And it includes a really hands-on immersive experience using the lean startup principles. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panel. So we have Leanne Sanders, founder of Visual Dreaming. Hi Leanne, how are you?
Hi Siobhan, good, how are you?
Great to see you. And we have Ben Grozier, co-founder of Class Cover. How are you, Ben?
Very good, thanks, Siobhan. Good to be here.
Great. And we have Tom Williams, who's a researcher at Charles Sturt University. How are you, Tom?
Yeah, g'day. Good, Siobhan. Ready to go.
Very good. Excellent. I thought we might just start with something fun, just to kick it off before we get to know everybody a little bit better. So this is just a fun question, and I'll start with you, Ben. If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
I reckon it'd be the old tried and tested time travel. I reckon it'd. I'd love to see. I'd love to live 3 lives or 4 lives. I've got so many things on my list that I want to do and see and witness that I'd love that capability.
Yeah, that was actually mine too. So, it'd be amazing. Leanne, what about you?
I'm a bit like Ben. I'd like to live till I was 500 because there's so much that I want to do. But my magic power would be, I suppose, to heal the world and others of anyone that goes through any mental health or grief or any stresses. That would be my power.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And Tom, what about you?
I think mine would be the power of hindsight. I mean, every day we're sort of umming and ahhing on something, and there's a sliding doors moment regularly. So if we could be looking into the future to see how things would pan out, that'd be brilliant.
Wouldn't it? Thanks, everyone. So we'll move on to something a little bit more serious now. And Leanne, I'd love to start with you. Can you describe for me that one point in your life when you first had the idea for your startup?
Yeah, the one point was being a health profession, working in mental health and disabilities, and knowing how under-resourced services are and the struggles to navigate services. So that was one point, and going through my own personal grief and loss and the impact of what mental health can do on families.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you talk us through a little bit more about your startup now and where you are?
Yeah, so we launched the app in the Apple and Google store September the 18th. We were really lucky. We had Stan Grant.
Congratulations, so exciting.
Thank you. And yeah, Stan Grant, who's one of my role models that I look up to, launched the app. And I think after having so many knockbacks being a startup, having your role model stand there on stage and just believe in what you do was probably one of the most incredible moments of my life. Yeah.
And I was there that night, and it was an amazing night. And an incredible moment for you. Could you just give the people who may not know what the app app actually does, just a little bit more information about how it actually works.
Yeah, so the app's a digital platform based on social and emotional wellbeing. So you set goals and invite your trusted networks into your journey, and there's some accountability around achieving your goals and sharing resources and visually taking photos or videos on your progress of achieving the goals. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And Tom, I'd like to move on to you. When did you realise you were going to go into academia? And can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your research area?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background's in animal sciences. I decided at a relatively early age that I was writing to livestock industries and decided to come to Charles Sturt University to pursue that. I then did an honours course where I did a small research project and promptly realised that it was something that I really enjoyed and wanted to move forward into in the long term. I've then moved in to do a PhD, and I'm now working as a postdoc within the university system. So essentially, I'm a 100% research employee at the university, and I'm employed on MLA-funded projects looking at the feedlot industry and looking at solutions for those in therapeutics and in point-of-decision diagnostics. So, yeah, essentially what we're trying to do is to improve health and welfare in the feedlot industry.
Fantastic. And I'd like just to talk a bit about research and entrepreneurship, which I think some might say is the perfect combination. You came through our incubator program. Could you talk us through your experience with the program, specifically engaging with the end user?
Yeah, of course. We essentially had a research project where we needed to find a solution for our research, which wasn't necessarily looking at our consumers and what they were interested in. We just needed to get the data to be able to interpret the results, to be able to then move forward with the research we were doing. So we were looking in abattoirs at some imagery and capturing information around lung health, and our collaborators at the time, who were the abattoirs, were saying, "Oh, this is really interesting information. It's something we might be able to utilise moving forward." So we'd sort of developed a solution to our own problem, but we recognised at that point that it was going to be a solution for our potential future clients, who are the abattoirs. We then decided that it would be a good idea to jump into the incubator program, and then got heavily confronted with all sorts of emotions and ideas that don't necessarily work but they're not necessarily associated with the research pathway, which is very straight up and down. There's not much about emotion and feel and how this is going to impact and what your clients are thinking about. You're often coming up with a solution and then trying to shoehorn it into a problem somewhere. And when we got into the incubator program, we're starting to use that entrepreneurial thinking to go, okay, actually, well, what do your clients need, and what can you provide them, not the other way around. So I guess off the back of that program, we were able to go, okay, actually, yes, we've got this product, but what we need to be able to provide is a service. We need to be able to offer solutions and long-term solutions. So the product is one of the ways we can do that, but we need to be developing an idea or a strategy to provide a service.
And you talked about some hard sort of moments with the emotion and things like that. Can you talk us through that a little bit, and maybe Ben can jump in here as well, because I know it did challenge some of your thinking at times?
Yeah, of course. My background has always been read the papers, find out where the gaps are, develop a strategy to find a solution for that. And that isn't what the entrepreneurial thinking is that we've sort of been working through with these incubator programs. It is, have your idea, have these conversations. What's the emotion? What's the story? Where's the support? And then reflect on that and start to build on your project and how you can monetize that and how you can find value in it for your clients. So it was a really big change, something that took a lot more effort to overcome. There was a lot of personal stigma associated with oh yeah, we're talking about our emotions and our feelings, and this is all well and good. But once we had those breakthrough moments with the teams that we were working with, you go, oh, actually, this is really important, and it's something that we probably should be thinking about as researchers anyway. So, in the follow-up to that, we're now sort of looking to run some entrepreneurial thinking courses within the university for our early to mid-career researchers, so we can get them in early into this thinking about discussing these things with industry, looking at our end users, and building good research from the outset.
Yeah, fantastic. And we're looking forward to working with you more closely on some of those projects. And Ben, I haven't moved on to you as such, but do you remember any light bulb moments with Tom and the incubator coming through and seeing that sort of shift in mindset?
Yeah, it's always funny to see the impact of putting a bunch of founders in a room with other founders, because as we know, it's a really isolated place to be quite often as someone who and it might be, we see this with CEOs, we see this with school principals, and founders are in effect leaders of their small business, and it can be very isolating to be trying to grow a business, to be on that roller coaster, whether it be by yourself, whether it be with a co-founder or a small team. And I guess when you talk about light bulb moments, the ones I love the most are the ones when everyone gets in a group, whether it be on Zoom or whether it be in face-to-face like we were for a fairly long period of time there down in Wagga, and the founders realise that they're in good company, they're in like-minded company, that there's support, that there's people going through the same things that they've gone through, that there's might be different difficulties, but there are difficulties. And everyone, I guess, sort of drifts towards thinking that this challenge must only be happening to me. And that's really the opposite. And that's to say that most founders are going through some version of those set of challenges when we're pre-product, pre-revenue, trying to validate a product, discover a potential competitor when we think we're the only one on the market, for example. All those anxiety-riddled moments that are filling up that kind of stress beaker, as I call it, moving it closer and closer to that sort of overflow stage, is alleviated somewhat by getting in the room in that sort of accelerator, incubator kind of environment, and just talking to people who are going through what you're going through.
Yeah, fantastic points. I'd like to move on a bit, Ben, and ask, how did a tennis coach teaching in England become a founder?
Well, interesting. I guess, I always explain, and I've said it to you a bunch of times, Siobhan, and I sort of split my adult working life up into three parts. And one part of it as a small business owner, and I ran tennis centres as a younger adult for about 10 years, evenly split between Australia and the UK. I'm also a qualified teacher, so I've spent a lot of time in education. And then I've got the class cover, the tech startup experience, which has been going now for 7 or 8 years. And really, almost to Tom's point, I guess it's just been a lifetime of curiosity and looking at how problems can be solved and trying to solve them, and having probably thousands of ideas come into my mind, with 99.9% of them being ones that are never going to be able to be built out, commercialised, viable, but a couple that have stuck. And when you have that curiosity, whether it be you're a tennis coach and then you see how someone could run a tennis centre a little better, or maybe a bit more efficiently, or to get better student outcomes, or whether it be you're a school teacher in a classroom and it can help you deliver more meaningful education for your kids, or you see something like I did, and that is when I was in that transition between Australia and the UK, I was teaching, I was doing a bit of tennis coaching, and then very simply a problem was just put in front of my very eyes in relation to casual teacher management, and just what a incredibly laborious task this was for people I called friends who were employing me as a casual teacher. And with that problem in my face, I went out to solve it. And that's what we still to this day continue to try and do, and that is to make schools' lives as easy as possible with the management of casual teachers.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know you've had to pivot a couple of times with COVID. Can you talk us through some of those moments and what you've added to class cover?
Yeah, so interesting year it's been. On the sum of all things, the business has been okay, but it hasn't been, it hasn't been a level process. And in a real nutshell, I guess we had preschool shutdown, let's call it, in especially New South Wales, and we're a very New South Wales heavy business when it comes to customers. We saw huge traffic, huge bookings, huge sign-ups in the lead up to sort of late March, as a lot of the full-time teachers who were getting nervous about being in front of classrooms started to call in absent. And so all of a sudden, behaviours we'd seen in the middle of winter, where we'd have peak traffic, were happening in March. Then the Premier shut the schools, and everything fell off a cliff. And from a school side of things, it wasn't too bad because we have 12-month licenses. Schools are unlikely to cancel just because of a 10-week break, so to speak. But our teacher side revenue went to zero immediately. We sell professional development courses to our relief teachers to help them maintain their accreditation. And so that pivot that you mentioned was the home teacher concept. And that was, I'm a parent. I've got a 8, a 7, and a 5-year-old. I'm in year two, and kindy respectively. And even as a teacher, and as a teacher who is grateful for having a house big enough to have kids learn in and to have a device per child, I found holding down a full-time job and educating them, even with grandparent support, to be pretty damn overwhelming.
Absolutely,
it was one of the most,
and I know we spoke about that a number of times. It was a challenging time.
Yeah, it certainly
Yeah.
was, and we have kids that love learning, and we have kids, like I said, who are well resourced, and we had grandparent help, and it was still an incredibly busy time. And I guess what we recognised was, if we're okay, if people who are relatively well off, who have a qualified teacher in the family, are pretty much close to stress beaker overflowing, what are the other parents doing? What are some of the parents who are doing it a little tougher? How are they going? And we created the home teacher platform, which was connecting the unemployed relief teachers to parents who wanted home tutoring support or homeschooling support. And we built it out very lean. We built it out very quickly. In under 4 weeks, we had a version 1 up and going. Had our test sessions underway, and then ultimately what happened is that the schools reopened, and so we sort of settled back into a traditional online tutoring platform. But I think, as you know, we were super excited to announce a partnership just last week with the Smith family, where we're now going to deliver 6,000 hours of online tutoring to disadvantaged kids who have been really set behind because of the school shutdown. So, the home teacher story, it's been quick. We've tried to make smart decisions, but at the same time, not try to agonise over things too much. Fail fast, fail cheap. And that's what's gotten us to where we are today.
Yeah. And as you know, during that time, we've also got a qualified teacher in our house. So I also reached out and used that platform a number of times. So it was a lifesaver some days. Now, Ben, you're obviously based in Sydney, but we've worked very closely with you for a number of years now. I really want to talk to you about paying it forward, and particularly paying it forward to our regional innovators. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, our business would not be where it is if it wasn't for people who um, had been way further down the track, had seen a lot of success, were probably incredibly time poor, but were still willing to have a coffee with us to talk about what we were doing in the business, how we should grow it, how we should build it, and just generally give feedback. And that pay it forward mentality in the Sydney startup scene, I was always really blown away by and so grateful for, and was always really resolved to try and pay it forward whenever someone who might only be slightly further down the road than what we were, but there might be an opportunity to share information that's going to save them either a lot of time or a lot of money. And so I do believe very deeply in the power of the pay it forward mentality. And what I know, Siobhan, you and I know that we've talked about a lot is that it's my belief, if you've been a good person for all of your life, then you shouldn't hesitate to call in a few favours every now and then. And that's to say, if you are happy to pay it forward, or you've paid it forward in the past, it almost definitely will be one of the most stressful times of your life starting a new business. especially starting a new business from
Absolutely.
scratch. And so that is the time to reflect and to say, look, I've been helpful. I've been a good human. I've helped when I've been asked, but you want to be comfortable with asking those or calling in those favours to get every little advantage you can when it comes to those early days of building out a business.
Thank you. And on that note, I'd like to now delve into a little bit more some of the challenges people in the regions face compared to the city. So I'll throw that out to the panel. But Leanne, would you like to comment first?
I think some of the challenges are the lack of technology startups. I mean, they're probably definitely out there, but having that network to be able to connect together more and support each other, that's a really big challenge, and especially through the highs and lows. It's really difficult to be in business and other people to really understand some of the struggles and when you're going through it. So that's definitely my biggest struggle being in the regional.
Being in the regions.
And also, yeah. And also, I suppose, and just the first time of having to build an app, there was a lot of no's and, that you can't do this. And so it would be great to, if someone does have an idea, to be able to know where to go and to be able to execute that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great comment. Tom, did you have anything else sort of to add? And I guess this is more sort of about, how we better harness some of these incredible innovations that are happening in the R&D sector to bring them to fruition?
Look, I guess for myself, it's a little bit of a different story because I'm working in agriculture in a regional area. So I drive out of the office and I'm looking at farms, which is where I'm trying to get products and technology and solve problems. So we're really fortunate in that regard. And in the second to that is everyone who's working in the ag space, or a lot of the people who are, tend to be rural, which means that there's a bit of an understanding of teleconferences or quick trips to Sydney and understanding around trying to fit things in. So in that regard, we're really fortunate in regard to R&D and then getting that spun out into a viable company. It's difficult because I'm sitting in a really comfortable space within the university. Obviously, it's a tough job and there's stress and whatnot. But at the end of the day, me not spinning that out isn't a major concern. I can rest on my laurels and go back to work the next day. And that's a bit of a problem in regards to, okay, how do we leverage this information and this IP that we've generated and get it out to the consumers and make an income for the university in a commercial stream that's not just bringing in money for research. So I think that's where we're starting to move with it now and getting all of our researchers engaged in these programs where we're thinking about commercialisation from the get-go. I think that's sort of where we're really getting fortunate. And there's a number of regional universities who are moving in that space now to ensure that we're seeing really good value out of the research we're doing in a commercial space.
Yeah, and we might touch on that a little bit later on. But Ben, I'll move back to you in terms of challenges. Obviously, you're based in the city, so I'd love a different perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I find it just so completely refreshing to be supporting the startups in the regional centres, and I guess as a pretty substantial point of difference I see between the two, let's say, kind of communities or cultures when it comes to startups in the regional centres versus in the city. Number one, I think that there's less sort of adherence or concern about adhering to what we call sort of a startup stereotype, and people that we've worked with through CSU, through the various projects, I think they bring this really refreshing mindset where they've identified a problem, they've got a solution, and they just want to get about solving it in the most efficient possible way. I think there's a way greater comfort, and again, it's things I talk to founders about all the time, a way greater comfort that life needs to blend into your business model. And that if you're someone who you might have a young family, you might have a big mortgage, you might have all sorts of pressures that are being applied to you personally, and the acknowledgement that they will need to be built into your business model, whether it comes to how long you can go without revenue, or how you price your product, or even how many hours a week you can commit to your product or your service or your business. I think the comfort levels around that are, in a very good way greater. In the cities, I see more of what I'd refer to as sort of the white male and 40 stereotype, and I think there is a greater or better gender and ethnicity balance in the regional startup sector than we see in the metropolitan areas. And in relation to how everyone is executing, I think there's a little bit too much, or sometimes a lot, kind of projecting when it comes to how they think they should be and how the founders think they should be. They should be telling everyone they're doing 80-hour weeks. They should tell everyone they're eating ramen noodles and possibly even just sleeping on their mate's couch, because that's what they've seen from the Silicon Valley stereotype. That's what they've seen, in the movies, on the TV shows. And I cannot tell you how enjoyable it is to work with people who aren't encumbered by stereotype and are just happy to be authentic, be themselves. And I also think it puts them on a pathway to solving problems, or solving real problems with real solutions, and finding appropriate markets to build the businesses out. And I think that we've seen, or I've certainly seen in the last 18 months, maybe because I've spoken about it probably about 200 times now, but this sort of apologetic, like, oh, but I'm from the regions, you're almost like you're the poor cousin, that I think has gone away a lot in the last 18 months to 2 years.
I totally agree with you, Ben.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that so much. And I think that there are actually as many advantages to being in the regions as there are disadvantages. And it's just, and when we always talk about finding your unfair advantage when it comes to being in business, well, that goes to your location as well. You need to find what your unfair advantage is, and that might be that your operating costs are way less than the city people that you're competing against, and that allows you to be more price competitive, for example. Like, there are as many wins as there are disadvantages, and we just need to pick the ones that work and drift towards them and march forward.
And Leanne, I'd love to get your perspective on what opportunities the regions bring us.
I think there's many opportunities. I think a big thing within startup is trust. And being in the regional community, I think that other health professions and users and community are more inclined to test, give feedback, because they trust you, and they also know the problem that we're trying to solve. And so I think that's a really big benefit, and the support that you get from community to make the bigger changes. So, yeah.
And I know you have a saying, Leanne, which I absolutely love. It takes a community to build an app. I think this is fantastic. So do you think that community is formed more easily in the regions?
I definitely do. Definitely. There has been times where I've gone to the city and kind of haven't known with relationships if I can trust them, because I haven't worked with them. I haven't known if things are genuine or not genuine, if they're trying to take advantage. But here in region, in Wagga, like I know who I can trust, and I've got a lot of people to bounce off and to keep going back to. And so, yeah, it definitely does take a community to raise a child and a community to build an app. So yeah.
I know you're a big fan of that saying, Ben. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. I honestly think going into business is going into business with someone is like going to a marriage, and a startup is often like a child. And I used to say, I had 4 kids: Olive, George, Patrick, and Class Cover. And the reality is that you want to bring that child up to be the best that they can possibly be. And you're not always going to agree with how to reach that end destination. And you're going to need help. You're going to need support. You don't need people to babysit your app, just like you need people to babysit your kids. And I just think it was such a great turn of phrase from Leanne there. It was,
Fantastic.
And again, it goes to that comfort acknowledgement. And again, I think show me someone who can say I need help, or show me someone who can say I was wrong, I need help, I made a mistake, and then you will find someone who is going to grow extremely quickly because they are comfortable being that person who has either made the mistake or reached out for help. And that's all part of the takes a village to grow the app. We see so much. We see so many founders just locking down because they're either nervous or they want to just control everything, or because they're worried about asking for help or even admitting error. And that is just such an incredible stymie on progress that they're doing themselves a massive disservice and their business.
Yeah, great points. And what qualities do you think a regional entrepreneur needs? Tom and Leanne, I'll throw this over to you guys.
I think there's a bit of resilience, and we've mentioned it before, which was that often we don't know who the innovators or the startup folk are in the region without coming into the accelerator and realizing, oh, I know you and you're all developing apps, and there is actually a community here. We're just not leveraging it as well as we should. And that's sort of, that's where it comes from for me.
What about you, Leanne?
Definitely resilience. And I think being a startup year, that resilience grows and grows and grows over time. And I think to be prepared to have the boxes of tissues, in your office,
Absolutely.
and to be able to pick back up from the emotions of the highs and lows.
Because there are many highs and lows. So absolutely. I'd like to talk a little bit more now, Leanne and Ben, about sort of how each of your startups have innovated and what the key features are. I know we did sort of briefly talk about it at the start, but could you elaborate a little bit more on the innovative approach?
You want to go there, Leanne?
Oh, me first? Okay. Sorry, Tom. I thought you'd go first. Worked in mental health, as I mentioned before, but the big part of the dream team within Visual Dreaming is really about bringing others onto a lonely journey of mental health. But I know personally the power of having a mentor that believes in you when sometimes you don't believe in yourself, and how life-changing that can be. And so, that was probably one of my biggest motivation was that that personal experience and wanting to be able to give others the tools to have that same experience as I did.
Yeah. Thanks, Leanne. And what about you, Ben, in terms of being innovative?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So probably the two things that come to mind is one about, I guess, how the product was built, but then also how the product was sold. And the reality is we've got to be innovating all the time. And in relation to the Class Cover product, we didn't build out some sort of genius algorithm or anything that I think really falls into that really groundbreaking category at a fundamental level. It was a booking platform, and it was a platform that displayed teacher availability, and then later had a two-way booking request system added onto it. There were plenty of examples of that, but just none, certainly in Australia, that were nuanced for the education sector. And so that what we needed to do there in relation to innovation was really around listening very carefully to our customers and all the little quirky nuances that they wanted built into the platform, and then building them out in a prioritized fashion. And really, how we more needed to innovate was in around how we sold the product. Or certainly that was a key area where I thought we needed to innovate, because you might have heard that one of the co-founders of PayPal, a guy called Peter Thiel, he once referred to the software as a service valley of death. And what this relies on, and this is fairly dated now, so I think we need to sort of adjust the figures. But what he said is that if an app is going to cost less than $100, or a software as a service is going to cost less than $100, people will typically purchase it on an impulse decision. And so you don't need the coercion, you don't need the explanation. People will just purchase. If they purchase, if the price point's above $1,000, then you can afford a sales team. And what Class Cover found was that we were right in the middle of that software as a service valley of death, charging our schools about $500 a year to use the product. We couldn't afford a sales team, and schools weren't making impulsive decisions. So how we innovated is we moved our sales offshore and out to the Philippines. We have a beautiful team of people in Cebu in the Philippines. They're like family to us. They've been with us for many, many years. But ultimately, it was a lower cost solution to try and get the land grab that we needed to achieve with Class Cover in order to get the market presence and to establish the business. So that was probably one of the pieces of innovation that really was that fork in the road and pretty good decision in retrospect, because I think we just would have been kind of hiding to nothing if we stayed with an Australian sales team.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. And Tom, just back to the incubator program, we did touch on it. What advice would you give to other students, who may just sort of be early stage researchers or still in their undergrad, about the experience?
Oh, look, it's a pretty simple one, really. It's a matter of, if you've got an idea or a premise for having these sorts of thoughts around your end user, then you really should be jumping on and taking advantage of these programs that are out there now, supported by the university and the New South Wales government. It's so, as an early student in a research area, it's so easy to get blindsided by reading things and doing as everyone's done for a long time. But I think we're pretty due to start innovating a little bit earlier on, in terms of research, and definitely getting out and getting a feel and understanding problems from a client side is something that we've learnt out of this, and it's going to be something that's really transferable to students looking to move into an academic and research for development role.
And I think that's such an important point, because I understand there was a federal government report back in 2018 which showed that the vast majority, which we've sort of talked about, of higher degree students had no end user engagement. So obviously we sort of need those stronger connections with industry, and understanding the problems that they face and need solved.
We do, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a little caveat to that, which is sometimes we still need to do research for the sake of research, because some wonderful things come out of that. But in the applied world, where we're looking to solve problems for our industries, then yeah, absolutely. Like, the first person you need to talk to is an industry collaborator, and then potentially your supervisor. You need to be building these relationships really early on, so they're coming to you with problems that you can then work to solve. Yeah,
good point. And I just think it's so important for our students too. There was another report that came out in terms of the 5 essential talents that companies are looking for, and it was intellectual curiosity, 360-degree thinking, cultural competency, empathy, and adaptability. And obviously, these are all key components of innovation and entrepreneurial skill set. So I think, to be able to embed that in curriculum is so important.
Absolutely. And if we're talking science, I don't think I've ever seen a subject titled any of those points. So it's really a matter of integrating that into what we're doing. And I think there are a lot of people in academia looking to do that now. But there's definite value in reaching outside of the university and going into these programs, like the incubator's running.
Thanks, Tom. Look, I'd like to move on a little bit now. We've spoken previously that a lot of people, have some great ideas or see some problems that need solving and have those solutions. What do you think it is that's holding people back from that? Leanne, do you want to touch on that first?
I think time and money. It takes a lot of time and dedication. And money, and also knowledge on how to build a prototype. Someone's got an idea, but how do they actually build that prototype? And I think that can often be why it's there.
Yeah, and what steps to take. Yeah, we've sort of talked a lot about, previously, Ben, a lot about confidence, and also I know you're very sort of passionate about talking about balance. Can you talk us through that and how balance, I know you touched on it briefly, is so important, and putting checks and balances in place to make sure that you are following the right path?
Yeah, look, I think, like I said, we talked about the life model and the business model, and just that authenticity to yourself is just so important when it comes to building a solution that's actually going to thrive in your individual circumstance. And again, it could literally be the size of your bank balance. What have you got? Have you got a war chest of funds because you inherited some big money from an auntie you never knew? Like, that will literally have an impact on what your business looks like when you get to go live, or when you get to do a V1, how many features will be on that version 1, and not acknowledging the impact of that is perilous, in my opinion. I think when it comes to why people don't execute on ideas, and I think everyone on the panel and in our audience probably knows that execution is everything. And those ideas come into your head at any given moment. If you think that it's not to do with luck and timing somewhat, then you're kidding yourself. And we see a lot of people conflating luck with talent. And I think being authentic about that is a very important thing to do. But be grateful for the luck you do receive, and that luck might be that the timing with when the idea came into your head was right for you to execute. And that's to say, if you're working a 60-hour-a-week full-time corporate job and you get the idea of your life, you may not be able to execute. It may have come to you at the wrong time. So when those ducks line up and you do find yourself in a position where the ideas arrived at the right time, you keep on waking up in the morning thinking, this is a good idea, this is a problem worth solving. And then the bank balance is right, the life situation is right, you're in position, then you need to execute. You don't want to hold on to it once all those fundamental boxes are ticked. You don't want to be too proud as a founder, and I don't like going to pitch events and to meet up nights where people say, oh, yeah, I've got a startup, but I don't want to tell you too much about it because I don't want anyone to steal my idea. 95% of the time, you are way better off getting that idea out into that meetup group or into that accelerator environment, because you'll probably get more help, more ideas, more checks and balances on what you're doing and how you're doing it than you will ever get disadvantaged by telling a few people about what you're doing, because chances are most people are too busy doing what they're doing to steal your idea.
To actually execute, absolutely.
That's right. Right.
Leanne, I'd like to ask you a little bit about sort of the biggest lessons that you've learned, or sort of what you're able to share with people in terms of those really big lessons, and what you might have done differently given hindsight.
The biggest lesson for me was holding back, and thinking, just like Ben said, I thought, if I share with everyone what I'm doing, then people are going to steal my ideas and I'm going to lose. I'll be too late. And that was the biggest lesson, because that held me back for a couple of years. And so when we kind of thought, you know what, we've got lots of other plans and additional features that are coming, we're just going to do it. And since we did, we've never looked back. So that's really my biggest lesson.
Yeah, amazing. Ben, any other comments you wanted to make on biggest lessons?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and I think it does just go back to that. Make sure that you're zigzagging your way to success, really, and that is that you're asking lots of questions, you're staying curious, you're willing to be corrected, you're willing to take constructive feedback. We talk about radical candor all the time. Challenge directly and care personally, and expect the same in return. And don't go to your family and friends exclusively for feedback about what you do, because simply they love you too much. And so make sure that you've got a diverse group of people to bounce ideas off, and to ultimately, whether it be in relation to to spend or time. Just make sure you're failing fast and failing cheap, and get comfortable with the idea that a failure is just a learning, and you'll move forward at 10 times the rate if you can do that.
Yep, and I actually love a quote, and I think it's by Brené Brown, that says there's no innovation and creativity without failure. So,
absolutely, that's right.
Yeah. Look, there is a question in the chat, and the question is, are there any legal hurdles in setting up a micro school at home for my 3 kids? So I'm not quite sure whether we need some more information about that or not, or Ben, whether you can comment on that.
I really can't comment about the legalities of something like that. If there's that question sort of been generated based on what we did with Home Teacher, that's just a platform that connects effectively a sole trader in the form of a teacher with an ABN with a parent willing to pay. So can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
Yep, not a problem.
I would say, Siobhan, sorry, checking with your State Department of Education, or someone like the New South Wales Educational Standards Authority. That'd probably be a good place to start.
Thanks, Ben. So, Ben, I'd also like just to touch a little bit more, how to make sure that, being a founder and your startup, obviously it's all consuming. How do you tie in that time, cost, quality?
So, I mean, fundamentally, I just think that time, cost, quality really dictates every project we do in work and life, and that is that, I've said many times in the past that anyone who says, sorry, I'm a perfectionist, to me, that will solicit a massive eye roll, internal eye roll by me, because I really think that as someone who's saying, sorry, I'm late, sorry, I was over budget, I'm just a perfectionist, is actually saying, I'm actually just a really poor manager of time, cost, and quality. Whether it be renovating a kitchen or planning a wedding, or building out a software product, we need to always be mindful of, are we building it right? Are we building the right thing? And are we building it fast enough? And we need to balance those 3 things, because, again, it comes down to budgets, it comes down to time. And if you've got a bank balance that allows you to take way greater amounts of time and allows you to take 2 weeks to decide on the colour of your A5 marketing brochure, then go forth and do it. Do I think it's efficient? No, I don't. But at the same time, most people, if they're time and resource starved, like we often are in startup, you need to be putting good checks and balances in and around when done is better than perfect. And most often, done is better than perfect. And it's and your bank balance, and again, your weekly schedule will thank you for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Leanne, did you have any other comments generally that you wanted to make about being a founder, about the startup ecosystem, or in here in the region, or any other general comments?
I think that the being a startup in the region, as I said before, has so many benefits, and that doing the incubator and programs like that is there forever. And Siobhan went through the program with CSU, but she stood by me right till now and to the future. So these kind of programs are really, really important, and to give it a go, and your first idea of what problem you're going to solve, the solution to that may not be the same within 12 or 2 years. It does pivot and change, but the end goal is always the same. So that's all I'd like to comment.
And just on that, I just wanted to talk, we don't have much time, but just a little bit about your why and the passion, because, I've seen it develop over the last couple of years, and I know it always comes back to your why.
Definitely, my why is grief from losing someone to mental health, and as I talked before about how it takes a community to raise an app, I think that when you live in a regional community and you see the ongoing pain of your why continue to happen in community, them highs and lows and boxes of tissues, just gets your shoes back on and gets you back out there.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we're just about out of time. I just wanted to quickly pop in the chat. We have our Ready to Launch Incubator pitch night coming up, and we'd love people to attend. So I'm going to pop that in the chat right now if you'd love to register. And thank you so much for having us, Spark Festival. We'll see you all soon. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Siobhan. Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
All right. Bye.